Althea Tanner heard the crash in the barn just as the sun dropped below the western ridge. She was halfway across the yard with a bucket of kitchen scraps when the sound punched through the evening quiet. A heavy thud, followed by the scatter of loose tools hitting dirt. Her first thought was coyote. Her second was thief. She set the bucket down without a sound, grabbed the shotgun from beside the door, and moved. The barn door hung open. She had latched it an hour ago. Althea slowed her breathing, thumbed back one hammer, and stepped inside. The air smelled like hay and leather, and something sharper. Copper. Blood. She swept the shotgun left, then right. The stalls were empty except for her mare, who stood quiet in the corner, ears forward. Then, she saw him. A man sprawled face down in the center aisle. One arm twisted beneath him. The other stretched toward the ladder. Dark jacket. Worn boots. Black hat lying a foot away. And blood. A slow spreading stain on his left shoulder, soaking through torn fabric. Althea kept the gun trained on him and moved closer. He groaned, tried to push himself up, and collapsed again. She saw his face then. Hard jaw. Stubble. Tired eyes barely open. Dust in his hair. He looked like he had ridden through hell and kept going until his body quit. He is not from Juniper Fork, she thought. She would remember a face like that. His hand moved, weak and shaking, reaching for something at his belt. She stepped on his wrist, not hard, just enough to stop him. He froze. His eyes found hers. "Help," he rasped. His voice was wrecked. "Please, they are coming." Althea felt ice slide down her spine. She glanced at the open door, then back at the stranger bleeding on her barn floor. Every instinct told her to walk away. Wounded men brought trouble. Bleeding men brought questions. And questions were the one thing Althea Tanner could not afford. But his eyes held hers, desperate and honest in a way that cut through every wall she had built. She made her choice in the space between two heartbeats. She lowered the shotgun, crouched beside him, and pressed her hand against the wound. He hissed through his teeth. "You picked a hell of a place to fall apart," she said. He tried to smile and failed. "Did not have much choice," he whispered. Althea pulled back his jacket. The bullet had gone clean through, high on the shoulder. Messy but not fatal if she moved fast. She heard hoofbeats in the distance, faint, but closing. Her gut clenched. "Can you stand?" she asked. He shook his head. She cursed under her breath, hooked her arms under his, and dragged him toward the back stall. He was heavy. Solid muscle and dead weight. She got him behind the hay bales just as the hoofbeats grew loud enough to count. 3 horses, maybe 4. Althea grabbed a saddle blanket, threw it over him, and shoved the shotgun into his hands. "Do not move," she said. "Do not breathe loud. And if anyone but me comes back here, you use that." He nodded once, teeth clenched. She stood, smoothed her apron, and walked out to meet whoever was hunting him. Her heart hammered, but her face stayed calm. She had learned a long time ago how to lie with her whole body. The riders pulled up in the yard just as she stepped out of the barn. 4 men, dust-coated and hard-eyed. The one in front had a silver badge pinched to his vest, but Althea did not recognize him. Not county, not town, which meant hired, and hired men did not follow rules. The badge tipped his hat. "Evening, miss. We are looking for a man. Wounded. Dangerous. You seen anyone come through here?" Althea folded her arms and let her voice go flat. "I have been inside all evening. Heard nothing. Seen nothing. You are welcome to look, but you will find dust and old hay and not much else." The badge studied her. His eyes were the color of dirty ice. "Pretty isolated out here," he said. "Woman alone. Must get lonely." Althea felt the threat under the words, but did not flinch. "I managed just fine," she said. The men behind him shifted in their saddles. One of them leaned forward, squinting toward the barn. "Thought I saw tracks," he muttered. "Fresh ones." Althea shrugged. "Could be mine. Could be coyote. Could be your imagination. You want to waste time looking? Go ahead. I have got supper waiting." The badge watched her for 5 long seconds. Then he smiled. And it was not a kind smile. "We will be back," he said. "You remember that. If you are hiding something, miss, it will not end well for you." Althea met his gaze without blinking. "I have got nothing to hide," she said. The lie tasted like ash. The riders turned and rode west, toward the ridge. Althea waited until the sound faded completely, then walked back into the barn. Her hands were shaking now. She hid them in her apron pockets. The stranger was still behind the hay, pale and sweating, but awake. She knelt beside him again. "They are gone," she said. "For now." He exhaled hard. "Thank you." She pulled the blanket off him. "Do not thank me yet. You are about to tell me why 4 men with guns want you dead, or I am dragging you back out there myself," he told her. His name was Jesse Briggs. He was a surveyor, hired by the Territorial Land Office to map water rights in the basin. 2 weeks ago, he had found something. A claim filed under a false name, boundaries redrawn, water diverted from 6 small ranches straight into the hands of one man, powerful man, connected man who did not like surveyors asking questions. Jesse had ridden to the county seat to file a complaint, and someone had put a bullet in him before he reached the courthouse. He had been running ever since. Althea listened without moving. When he finished, she asked the only question that mattered. "Who?" Jesse looked at her with those tired, honest eyes. "Clayton Rourke." The name hit her like a fist to the chest. Rourke owned half the valley and wanted the other half. He sat on the town council. He held loans on most of the small ranches, including hers, and he had been smiling at her every Sunday in church for the past 2 years like a man who thought patience would get him what he wanted. Althea felt the walls closing in. "You just made me an enemy of the most dangerous man in 3 counties, she said. Jesse swallowed hard. "I am sorry. I did not know where else to go." She stood, paced 3 steps, turned back. "You have proof?" He nodded. "Maps. Forged documents. All in my saddlebag, which is somewhere between here and the ridge where I lost my horse." Althea closed her eyes. She could still turn him in. Tell Rourke's men she found a stranger bleeding in her barn and did the right thing. Save herself. Save the ranch. But the thought turned her stomach. She opened her eyes and made her second choice of the night. "We find your saddlebag," she said. "We get your proof. And then we figure out how to stay alive long enough to use it." Jesse stared at her like she had grown wings. You are helping me? She gave him a look that could cut glass. I am helping me. If Rourke is stealing water, he is stealing from my land too, and I have worked too hard to let some land-grabbing snake take what is mine. Now shut up and let me stop that bleeding before you pass out again. She brought him into the house after full dark, sat him at the kitchen table under the lamp, and cleaned the wound with whiskey and boiled water. He did not cry out, but she saw the pain in the way his jaw locked, and his breathing went shallow. She stitched him up with thread meant for mending harnesses, her hands steady even though her mind was racing. Jesse watched her face the whole time. You have done this before, he said quietly. Althea did not look up. My brother. Fence mending accident. He lived. Jesse was quiet for a moment. Where is he now? Dead, she said. Winter fever, 3 years back. She tied off the last stitch and stepped back. That will hold if you do not do anything stupid. He met her eyes. Feels like I already did. She made him eat. Bread and cold beef and the last of the apple butter. He was half-starved, and it showed. While he ate, she asked the questions that mattered. How long before those men come back? A day, he said. Maybe 2. Rourke will want to be sure I am dead before he moves on. And if we get the proof to someone who matters? Jesse hesitated. There is a federal judge in Silver City. Honest man. He would listen. But Silver City is 4 days hard ride, and I can barely stand. Althea sat down across from him. Then we buy time. She thought fast. Tomorrow is Sunday. Rourke will be at church. So will half the town. If we are both there, acting normal, it might slow him down. Make him think twice before moving openly. Jesse frowned. You want to walk into a room with the man trying to kill me? She smiled, thin and cold. I want to make him think he has already won. You are nobody. A drifter. I took pity on you, patched you up, and now you are moving on. He does not know I know who you are or what you found. We give him that story, and he relaxes. Buys us time to find your saddlebag and plan our next move. Jesse studied her like he was seeing her for the first time. You are terrifying, he said. She stood and started clearing the table. I am practical. There is a difference. He caught her wrist as she reached for his plate. Why are you really doing this? The question hung between them, too big for the small kitchen. Althea pulled her hand back slowly. Because I know what it is like to have everything hinge on a lie, she said. And I know what happens when the truth comes out too late. She did not explain further, and Jesse did not push. But something shifted in the air between them. A recognition. They were both carrying weight no one else could see. She showed him to the small room off the kitchen, the one her brother used to sleep in. 1 bed, 1 chair, 1 window that looked out on nothing but dark prairie. You stay inside tomorrow morning, she said. I will bring you clothes that fit. You are a cousin from back east, recovering from an injury. Quiet type. No one will look twice. He nodded. Althea. He said her name carefully, like he was testing its shape. Thank you. She turned in the doorway. Do not thank me until we are both still breathing at the end of this. She did not sleep. She sat at the kitchen table with the lamp turned low and went through everything she knew. Rourke had been circling her ranch for 2 years, ever since her brother died and left her alone. He had offered to buy her out 3 times. Each time, his smile got sharper and his price got lower. She had refused. She had managed the land, kept the cattle alive through drought, fixed fences and roofs and water lines, until her hands bled. And all of it hinged on one piece of paper she had signed in a moment of desperation. A claim adjustment, filed quietly, pushed through by a clerk who owed her a favor. She had moved her water access by 30 feet to save her herd during the dry summer 2 years ago. It was illegal, and if Rourke ever found out, he could take everything. That was her secret. The one sin she could never confess. The forged claim that kept her alive. And now a man was bleeding in her house because he had found someone else's forgery. The irony was not lost on her. She thought about what Jesse had said. Proof. Maps. Forged documents. If they could expose Rourke, maybe the scrutiny would fall on him hard enough that her own small crime would stay buried. Or maybe it would all come crashing down and take her with it. Either way, she was done pretending she could hide forever. She had made her choice the moment she pulled Jesse Briggs out of that barn. Now, she just had to survive it. Morning came cold and clear. Althea dressed for church in her second-best dress. Dark blue with a high collar and long sleeves. She braided her hair tight and pinned it at the nape of her neck. Respectable, invisible. She brought Jesse a clean shirt and trousers that had belonged to her brother, and they fit well enough. He moved stiffly, but he could walk. That would have to be enough. They took the wagon into town. The ride was silent, except for the creak of wheels and the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves. Jesse sat beside her, hat pulled low, face blank. Althea kept her eyes on the road and her thoughts locked down tight. If anyone saw the fear in her, this would all fall apart. Juniper Fork was not much. A main street with a general store, a bank, a saloon, and a church at the end. 40 families, give or take. Everyone knew everyone's business, and secrets lasted about as long as fresh snow in July. Althea pulled the wagon up to the church and climbed down. Jesse followed, moving carefully. She could feel eyes on them already. Widow Gaines, the blacksmith, the banker's wife. And then Rourke, standing on the church steps in a fine coat and polished boots, talking to the pastor like he owned the building and everyone in it. He saw her. His gaze flicked to Jesse, lingered, then came back to her with a question in it. Althea walked straight toward him, chin up. "Morning, Mr. Rourke." He smiled. "Miss Tanner." "And who is this?" "My cousin," she said smoothly. "Jesse Briggs. Visiting from Missouri. Recovering from a coaching accident. He will be staying a few days." Rourke extended a hand. Jesse shook it without flinching, even though Althea could see the pain in the way he held his shoulder. "Pleasure," Jesse said, voice flat and polite. Rourke studied him for a beat too long. "You look familiar." Jesse shrugged. "I have got one of those faces." Rourke's smile did not reach his eyes. "I suppose you do." He turned back to Althea. "I hope you will join me for lunch after service, Miss Tanner. I have been meaning to discuss your property situation." She felt the trap in the invitation but kept her face pleasant. "That is kind, but I have got work waiting." "Another time, perhaps." Rourke's smile thinned. "Of course." Another time. The service was endless. Althea sat in the third pew, Jessie beside her, and felt Rourke's gaze on the back of her neck like a brand. The pastor talked about honesty and righteousness and the weight of sin. Every word felt aimed directly at her. She kept her hands folded in her lap and her breathing even. Beside her, Jessie was still as stone, but she could feel the tension radiating off him. When they finally stood for the closing hymn, she allowed herself one glance back. Rourke was watching them both, with the expression of a man doing calculations. They were running out of time. After the service, they left quickly. No socializing, no lingering. Althea drove the wagon out of town at a steady pace, not too fast, not too slow. Jessie waited until they were out of sight before he spoke. He knows. Maybe, Althea said. Or maybe he is just suspicious. Either way, we need that saddlebag. Tonight. They went back to the ranch and planned. Jessie described the place where he had lost his horse, a rocky draw 2 miles west near the old fence line. Althea knew the area. Rough country. Easy to get turned around in the dark. But they did not have a choice. If Rourke's men found the saddlebag first, everything Jessie had gathered would disappear, and so would any chance of stopping him. They would leave after sunset. 2 hours there, 2 hours back. In and out before anyone noticed. It was a bad plan, but it was the only plan they had. Althea spent the afternoon checking supplies. Rope, canteen, matches, a rifle and the shotgun. Jessie watched her work with quiet intensity. You have done this kind of thing before, he said. Running at night, taking risks. She did not look up. I have done what I had to do. That is not the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I want to know. Your secret. The one you mentioned last night. Althea's hand stilled. That is not your business. Maybe not, Jessie said. But if we are going to trust each other with our lives tonight, I need to know who I am riding with. Althea turned to face him. Fine. 2 years ago, during the drought, my cattle were dying. My water access was not enough. So I moved my claim boundary, filed the paperwork under a dead man's name, got a clerk to push it through without questions. It saved my ranch, and it is just as illegal as whatever Rourke did. If this all comes out, I lose everything. Jessie absorbed that without flinching. Then we make sure it does not come out, he said. Simple as that. She let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Simple as that. They rode out just after sunset. The sky was a bruised purple fading to black, and the air had that sharp edge that promised cold later. Althea led the way on her mare, Jessie following on the old gelding she used for heavy work. His shoulder had to be screaming, but he did not complain. They moved quietly, following the fence line west toward the draw. The land here was all scrub and rock, broken up by dry washes and stunted cedar. Good country for hiding, bad country for finding anything. Althea pulled up at the edge of the draw and dismounted. Jessie slid down beside her, moving carefully. Somewhere down there, he said, gesturing to the tangle of boulders and brush below. I remember a lightning-struck tree and a flat rock shaped like an anvil. Althea scanned the darkness. That narrows it down to about 100 places. He almost smiled. You are not very encouraging. She handed him the rifle. I am realistic. Come on. They picked their way down into the draw, moving slow and careful. The moonlight was thin, just enough to keep them from breaking an ankle. Althea kept one hand on her revolver and her eyes on the shadows. Every sound felt too loud. Every movement felt like a target. Jessie stopped suddenly, pointing. There. She followed his gaze and saw it, a twisted black shape against the hillside. Lightning-struck tree. They moved toward it, and there, half buried under a tumble of loose rock, was the saddlebag. Jessie pulled it free, checked the contents, and exhaled hard. It is all here. Maps. Documents. Enough to bury Rourke. Althea felt a sharp rush of relief. Then she heard the horses. Multiple riders, coming fast from the north. Her gut dropped. They had been followed. Or Rourke had guessed. Either way, they were out of time. "Run," she said. They scrambled back up the draw, rocks sliding under their boots. Althea reached the horses first, swung into the saddle, and pulled Jessie up behind her on the mare. The gelding bolted at the sound of gunfire, and suddenly the night exploded with noise. Shots cracked through the dark. Men shouting. Hooves pounding. Althea kicked the mare into a dead run, heading east toward the fence line, and the narrow gap she knew was there. Jessie held on with one arm, the saddlebag clutched tight in the other. A bullet whined past her ear. Another hit a rock to her left and ricocheted into the dark. She leaned low over the mare's neck and rode like hell. The gap appeared ahead, a break in the rocks barely wide enough for a horse. She aimed for it and prayed. The mare plunged through, stumbled, caught herself, and kept running. Behind them, the riders crashed into the rocks and cursed. Bought them seconds. Maybe a minute. Not enough. They made it back to the ranch, just ahead of the riders. Althea pulled the mare to a skidding stop, and Jessie dropped to the ground, wincing. "Inside," she said. "Now." They ran for the house. Althea slammed the door, dropped the bar, and grabbed the shotgun. Jessie threw the saddlebag on the table and started pulling out maps and papers. "We need to hide this," he said. "If they search the house, it is over." Althea thought fast. The cellar. Under the floor. There is a loose board in the back corner. No one knows about it. Jessie nodded, scooped up the documents, and followed her through the kitchen to the narrow cellar door. She pulled it open, and he disappeared down the ladder. Outside, the riders pulled into the yard. 4 of them, maybe 5. Althea heard boots hit the ground and voices, low and ugly. She climbed back up, closed the cellar door, and shoved the rug over it. Jessie came up behind her, breathing hard. "What now?" "Now we talk," she said. She opened the door before they could kick it in. The badge from yesterday stood on her porch, gun drawn. Behind him, 3 men with rifles. No pretense this time. No polite questions. "Where is he?" the badge said. Althea kept her face blank. "Who?" "Do not play stupid, Miss Tanner." "The surveyor. We know he is here. We know you have been hiding him. You have got one chance to hand him over before this gets ugly." Althea felt Jessie tense behind her. She spoke before he could do something stupid. "He is here. He is my cousin. I told you that this morning." The badge sneered. "Your cousin got shot 2 nights ago trying to steal from Mr. Rourke, We have been tracking him ever since. Now step aside. Althea did not move. You have got no authority here. That badge does not mean anything outside town limits. And unless you have got a warrant signed by a real lawman, you are trespassing. Get off my land. The badge's face went hard. You are making a mistake. Maybe, Althea said, but it is my mistake to make. Now leave. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the badge holstered his gun and stepped back. You have got until morning, he said. Then we come back with enough men to burn this place to the ground if we have to. Rourke wants his property back. And he wants the surveyor dead. You can hand him over, or you can go down with him. Your choice. He turned and walked back to his horse. The others followed. They rode out slow, making sure she understood the threat. Althea closed the door and leaned against it, shaking. Jessie put a hand on her shoulder. We need to leave. Tonight. She shook her head. We would not make it 10 miles. They will be watching every road. We need another plan. Jessie looked at her, and his face was grim. There is no other plan, Althea. Rourke owns this valley. We can run, or we can die. Those are the options. Althea pulled away from the door and started pacing. Think. There had to be something they were missing. Some angle Rourke had not covered. She stopped, suddenly. The witness. Jessie frowned. What witness? You said you filed a complaint at the county seat before you got shot. Who did you talk to? Jessie thought for a moment. A clerk. Young guy. Nervous. He took my statement and said he would pass it to the land office. But he never got the chance. I was shot an hour later. Althea's mind raced. If that clerk is still alive, he can testify that you tried to report Rourke before any of this happened. It corroborates your evidence. Makes it harder for Rourke to claim you are just a thief. Jessie caught on. But we would need to get to him. And he is in the county seat. 2 days' ride. Althea smiled, sharp and cold. Not if we do not ride. She explained fast. There was a freight wagon that ran from Juniper Fork to the county seat every Monday. Left at dawn. Carried grain and mail and anyone willing to pay $1 for passage. If they could get on that wagon, they could travel in plain sight. Hidden among farmers and families. Rourke's men would be watching the roads for 2 riders. They would not stop a freight wagon. Jessie stared at her. That is insane. She met his eyes. You have a better idea? He did not. They spent the rest of the night preparing. Althea packed light. 2 days' worth of food. Spare clothes. The maps and documents tucked into a leather satchel. Jessie checked his revolver and reloaded the rifle. Neither of them slept. At first light, they walked into town on foot, staying off the main road, cutting through the brush and dry washes. It took an hour, and by the time they reached the edge of Juniper Fork, Althea's legs were aching, and Jessie's face was gray with pain. But they made it. The freight wagon was loading up in front of the general store. A big man with a beard was hefting sacks of grain into the back, while a tired-looking woman settled 2 children on the bench seat. Althea walked up and handed the man $1. 2 passengers to the county seat. He looked them over, shrugged, and pocketed the coin. Climb in. They did. The back of the wagon was crowded with sacks and crates and 1 other passenger, an old man dozing with his hat over his face. Althea and Jessie squeezed into a corner and pulled a tarp over their legs. The wagon lurched forward. No one stopped them. No one questioned. They rolled out of Juniper Fork, just as the sun cleared the eastern hills, and Althea allowed herself one small breath of hope. Maybe this would work. Maybe they would live long enough to see Rourke answer for what he had done. The ride was long and rough. The wagon creaked and bounced over every rut in the road. Jesse's shoulder had started bleeding again, a slow seep that soaked through his shirt. Althea tore a strip from her petticoat and wrapped it tight without a word. The old man woke up once, looked at them, grunted, and went back to sleep. The woman up front sang quietly to her children. The day crawled by. They stopped once at midday to water the horses. Althea and Jessie stayed in the wagon, hidden under the tarp. No one bothered them. By late afternoon, they were halfway to the county seat. That was when the storm hit. It came out of nowhere, a black wall of clouds rolling in from the west. The wind picked up, and the first drops of rain hit like thrown stones. The driver cursed and whipped the horses faster, but it was no use. The storm caught them, and the sky opened up. Rain hammered the wagon. The road turned to mud. The wheels bogged down, and the driver had to stop twice to dig them out. Althea and Jessie huddled under the tarp, soaked and shivering. The temperature had dropped 20 degrees in an hour. Jesse's teeth were chattering, and his face had gone pale. Shock, Althea thought. Or infection. Or both. She pulled him closer, sharing what little warmth she had. His head dropped against her shoulder. "Sorry," he muttered. "For what?" she asked. "For dragging you into this." She huffed a bitter laugh. "I dragged myself. You just gave me an excuse." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When this is over, if we live, I want to know you. Really know you. Not just the part you show everyone else." Althea's throat went tight. "Why?" "Because," Jessie said, "I have never met anyone who scared me and made me feel safe at the same time. And I think that is worth holding on to." She did not know what to say to that. So she just held him tighter and listened to the rain. The storm raged for hours. By the time it finally broke, the sun was setting, and the road was a river of mud. The driver pulled the wagon off into a stand of cottonwoods and announced they were stopping for the night. No point trying to push through in the dark. They would camp here and finish the ride in the morning. Althea helped Jessie down from the wagon. He could barely stand. She got him to a dry spot under the trees and built a small fire with wood she scrounged from the wagon bed. The driver's wife gave them a blanket and a sympathetic look. "Your man does not look good," she said quietly. "He will be all right," Althea said, even though she was not sure she believed it. The woman nodded and went back to her children. Althea wrapped the blanket around Jessie and forced him to eat a few bites of bread. Then she checked his shoulder. The wound was angry and hot, infected. She cleaned it again with whiskey and wrapped it as best she could. He needs a doctor, she thought. But there was no doctor out here, just her. And hope. Jessie woke her before dawn. "Althea." His voice was rough but steady. She opened her eyes. He was sitting up, color back in his face, fever broken. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I got shot and dragged across half the territory." he said. But alive. She let out a shaky breath. Good. We need you alive. They broke camp fast. The driver hitched the horses and got the wagon back on the road. The mud had dried enough to make progress, and by mid-morning they rolled into the county seat. It was bigger than Juniper Fork. 2 streets instead of 1. A real courthouse. A hotel. And somewhere in that courthouse, a clerk who could back up Jesse's story. Althea and Jesse climbed down from the wagon, paid the driver, and headed straight for the land office. It was a narrow building tucked between the courthouse and a feed store. Jesse pushed the door open, and they stepped inside. The clerk looked up from his desk. He was young, maybe 20, with ink-stained fingers and a nervous twitch. Jesse walked up to the counter. You remember me? The clerk's eyes went wide. You are supposed to be dead. Jesse leaned on the counter. Not yet. I need you to tell me what happened after I left your office 2 weeks ago. The clerk glanced toward the door, then back at Jesse. I filed your complaint. Passed it to the land officer like I was supposed to. But before he could act on it, someone came in. Man in a fine coat. Said there had been a mistake. Said you were a con artist trying to stir up trouble. He had a letter from the territorial governor backing him up. My boss believed him. Your complaint got buried. Jesse's jaw tightened. You have proof of that? The clerk nodded slowly. I kept a copy, just in case. I did not trust it. Give it to me, Jesse said. The clerk hesitated. If I do this, I am done. Rourke will come after me. He already is, Althea said. The only way to stop him is to bring him down. Help us, and you help yourself. The clerk looked at her for a long moment. Then he pulled a file from a locked drawer and handed it over. This better work. They had everything. Jesse's original complaint. The clerk's testimony. The forged documents Jesse had risked his life to recover. And now they needed someone who could use it. The federal judge, Althea said. You said there was one in Silver City. Jesse nodded. Judge Holloway. He is honest, but he is 4 days away. We do not have 4 days. Rourke's men are going to figure out where we went. They will come after us. Althea thought fast. Then we do not go to Silver City. We bring Holloway here. How? We send a wire. Tell him we have evidence of federal land fraud. He will come. Jesse looked doubtful. That is a hell of a gamble. Althea met his eyes. Everything we have done so far has been a gamble. One more will not kill us. Jesse almost smiled. You are terrifying. You already said that. They walked to the telegraph office and composed the message. Judge Holloway. Evidence of territorial land fraud in Juniper Fork Basin. Urgent federal review required. Lives at risk. Please respond. Jesse Briggs, Surveyor. They sent it and waited. 2 hours later, the reply came. Arriving in 3 days. Stay safe. Holloway. 3 days. That was the new finish line. Stay alive for 3 days. And they could end this. But first, they had to get back to Juniper Fork without getting killed. They bought 2 horses with the last of Althea's money and rode out at sunset. No freight wagon this time. No hiding. Just speed and a prayer. They pushed the horses hard, riding through the night. The road was empty and the moon was bright, and for a while Althea let herself believe they might actually make it. Then, just after midnight, they heard the riders behind them. 6, maybe 8. Coming fast. Jessie looked at her. We cannot outrun them. Althea scanned the landscape. There, a canyon to the north. Narrow and rocky. We can lose them in there. They turned off the road and plunged into the canyon. The walls rose up on both sides, cutting off the moonlight. The horses stumbled on loose rock, but they kept moving. Behind them, the riders followed. Shots echoed off the canyon walls. Althea felt one bullet zip past her head. Too close. Jessie pulled up suddenly. Dead end. The canyon terminated in a sheer rock face. No way forward. No way out. Althea's heart sank. We are trapped. Jessie dismounted fast, pulled the rifle, and took cover behind a boulder. Althea grabbed the shotgun and crouched beside him. The riders appeared at the mouth of the canyon, silhouettes against the moonlit desert beyond. 8 men. All armed, the badge in front. He called out, his voice echoing off the stone. End of the line, Briggs. Hand over the documents, and we will make it quick. Jessie did not answer. He aimed and fired. The shot caught one rider in the shoulder and sent him tumbling from his horse. The others scattered, taking cover. Return fire lit up the canyon. Bullets ricocheted off rock. Althea fired the shotgun, reloaded, fired again. It was chaos. Noise and smoke and the sharp smell of gunpowder. Jessie dropped 2 more men. Althea hit 1, but there were still 5 left, and they were closing in. We cannot hold them, Jessie said. I know, Althea said, but we can slow them down. She pulled a match from her pocket, struck it, and tossed it into a pile of dry brush at the canyon mouth. The fire caught fast, fueled by wind and dead wood. Flames shot up, blocking the entrance. The riders fell back, cursing. Bought us time, Althea said. Not much. Enough, Jessie said. He grabbed her hand. Come on. They climbed. There was a crack in the rock face, narrow and steep, barely wide enough for a person. Jessie went first, hauling himself up, one-handed, his shoulders screaming. Althea followed. The satchel slung across her back. The fire below roared. Smoke filled the canyon. The riders shouted and tried to push through, but the flames held them back. Althea and Jessie climbed until their hands bled and their lungs burned. Then, finally, they reached the top. Open desert stretched out before them, silver under the moon. They collapsed on the stone, gasping. Below, the fire was dying. The riders would find a way around soon. We need to keep moving, Jessie said. Althea nodded. They caught their breath, found the horses waiting on the far side of the ridge, and rode. Dawn found them 10 miles outside Juniper Fork, exhausted and filthy but alive. They stopped at a creek to water the horses and clean up. Jessie washed the blood off his hands. Althea scrubbed her face and tried to smooth her hair. They looked like they had been through a war, which, Althea supposed, they had. We cannot go back to the ranch, Jessie said. Work will be waiting. Althea nodded. We go straight to the church. It is Sunday. Whole town will be there. We make our stand in public. Force Rourke to answer for what he has done in front of everyone. Jesse looked at her. That is dangerous. He could have us shot before we finish talking. Althea smiled, cold and hard. Then, we better talk fast. They rode into Juniper Fork just as the church bells started ringing. People were gathering on the steps, dressed in Sunday best, talking and laughing. Althea and Jesse dismounted and walked straight through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers started. They looked like hell, and everyone could see it. Rourke was inside, sitting in the front pew like always. He saw them walk in, and his face went flat. The pastor stopped mid-sentence. The congregation went silent. Jesse walked up the aisle, the satchel in his hands. "Clayton Rourke," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "You are under investigation for federal land fraud, theft of water rights, and attempted murder. I have documents that prove you forged claims, bribed officials, and diverted water from a dozen small ranches to line your own pockets. And I have witnesses who will testify to all of it." Rourke stood slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes were murderous. "You have got nothing," he said. "You are a thief and a liar, and no one here is going to believe you." Althea stepped forward. "I believe him, and so will Judge Holloway when he arrives in 2 days to review the evidence." Rourke's mask slipped. "You sent for a federal judge?" Jesse nodded. "We did. And if anything happens to us between now and then, he will know exactly who to look at." The room was dead silent. Then the banker stood up. "I want to see that evidence." So did the blacksmith. And the widow. And half the congregation. Rourke saw the tide turning. His hand moved toward his coat. Jesse's hand moved faster, pulling his revolver and aiming it square at Rourke's chest. "Do not," he said quietly. Rourke froze. For a long moment, the only sound was breathing. Then the sheriff walked in. Real sheriff this time, not one of Rourke's hired guns. He looked at the scene, looked at Jesse's gun, looked at Rourke. "Someone want to tell me what is going on?" Jesse lowered the gun, slowly. "I am Jesse Briggs. I am a territorial surveyor. This man tried to have me killed to cover up land fraud. I have proof." The sheriff studied him. "You the one that got shot 2 weeks back?" Jesse nodded. "Then I have been looking for you. There is a federal warrant out for Rourke. Came through yesterday. Fraud, bribery, conspiracy. You just saved me the trouble of tracking him down." Rourke was arrested on the spot, hands cuffed, led out of the church in front of everyone. His hired men scattered. Some ran, some surrendered. By nightfall, it was over. The valley was quiet. Althea and Jesse gave their statements to the sheriff, handed over the evidence, and watched as the whole corrupt system Rourke had built started to collapse. The forged claims were voided, water rights restored, loans forgiven. And Althea's small illegal adjustment, buried in the avalanche of Rourke's much larger crimes. No one even looked at it. She had gambled everything, and somehow she had won. That night, they sat on the porch of her ranch and watched the stars come out. Jesse's shoulder was bandaged properly now, courtesy of the town doctor. Althea had washed the dust out of her hair and changed into clean clothes. They were both alive, both free. It felt unreal. "So what now?" Jesse asked. Althea was quiet for a moment. "I do not know. Fix the fences. Plant next season's crops. Keep the ranch running. Same as always." Jesse looked at her. "That is not what I meant." She met his eyes. "I know." He reached for her hand. "I want to stay, if you will have me. Not as a cousin, not as a stranger you saved, as someone who wants to build something with you. Something real." Althea felt her walls crack. "Just a little. That is a hell of a commitment." Jesse smiled. "I have already been shot for you. Feels like I am invested." She laughed, and it surprised her how easy it was. "You are insane." "Maybe," he said, "but I am also serious." Althea looked at their joined hands. She thought about trust, about risk, about the loneliness she had carried for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Then she squeezed his hand. "All right. Stay. But you are fixing the north fence first." "Deal," Jesse said. They spent the next 2 days working side by side, mending fences, clearing brush, fixing the barn door that had been broken since the night Jesse stumbled in bleeding and changed everything. It was hard work, and Jesse's shoulder was still healing, but he did not complain. They talked while they worked. Small things, big things. He told her about growing up in Missouri, learning surveying from his father, losing both parents to cholera, and spending 10 years drifting. She told him about her brother, about the ranch, about the weight of keeping everything together alone. They were building something, not just fences. Trust. When Judge Holloway arrived on the 3rd day, they met him at the courthouse with the full evidence file. He reviewed everything, took statements, and promised a full territorial investigation. Work would stand trial. Justice would be served. It felt like an ending, but it also felt like a beginning. A week later, Althea and Jesse stood at the edge of her property, looking out over the land. The water was flowing clean again, diverted back to its rightful course. The cattle were grazing. The sky was wide and blue. "You know," Jesse said, "I never thought I would end up on a ranch in the middle of nowhere." Althea raised an eyebrow. "Regretting it already?" He laughed. "Not even a little." She smiled. "Good. Because I could use a partner. Someone who is not afraid of hard work. Someone who does not run when things get dangerous." Jesse looked at her, his expression serious. "I am not going anywhere, Althea. Not unless you tell me to." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of him. "Then you better get used to dust, and early mornings, and fixing things that break." He grinned. "I think I can manage." She kissed him then, slow and sure, and it felt like the most honest thing she had done in years. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "We are going to be all right," she said. "Yeah," Jesse agreed. "We are." The seasons turned. Summer gave way to autumn. The ranch prospered. Althea and Jesse worked the land together, and slowly, the weight she had carried alone for so long became lighter. He was steady, reliable, and he made her laugh, which was something she had not done enough of. They rebuilt the barn. They planted a garden. They talked about the future in a way that felt real instead of fragile. One evening, as the first snow began to fall, Jesse came in from checking the livestock and found Althea at the stove. stirring a pot of stew. He hung his coat and hat by the door and crossed the room to stand behind her. "Smells good," he said. She leaned back against him. "It is edible. That is all I am promising." He wrapped his arms around her waist. "I will take it." They stood there for a moment, warm and quiet. Then Jesse said, "I want to marry you." Althea went still. He felt it and tightened his hold. "I know it is fast. I know we have only been doing this a few months. But I have never been more sure of anything. I want to build a life with you. A real one. Kids. Mornings. Everything." She turned in his arms and looked up at him. "You are serious?" "Completely," he said. She searched his face and found only honesty. "Then yes." Jesse blinked. "Yes?" "Yes," she said. "I will marry you." He kissed her hard, lifting her off her feet, and she laughed against his mouth. The stew burned. Neither of them cared. They were married in the spring, in the same church where they had faced down Rourke. The whole town turned out. Even the banker, who had quietly returned the interest on Althea's loan after Rourke's arrest. The pastor smiled through the whole ceremony. Althea wore a simple dress, cream-colored with lace at the collar. Jesse wore a clean shirt and his best jacket. They said their vows in front of everyone, and when Jesse kissed her, the room erupted in applause. Afterward, there was a meal at the saloon. Dancing. Laughter. It was loud and messy and perfect. Althea looked around at the faces of her neighbors, people she had lived beside for years but never really let in, and felt something unlock in her chest. She was not alone anymore. She had never really been alone. She had just been too scared to see it. Jesse pulled her onto the makeshift dance floor, and they spun through the crowd, clumsy and laughing. "This is it," she thought. "This is what I was fighting for. Not just the land, not just survival. This. Connection. Love. A future worth protecting." They went home that night to the ranch, to the house that was now theirs together. Jesse carried her over the threshold, even though she protested. "Tradition," he said. She rolled her eyes but did not argue. Inside, they stood in the quiet kitchen and looked at each other. "We did it," Althea said. "We survived." Jesse pulled her close. "We did more than survive. We won." She rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong. Outside, the wind whispered through the cottonwoods. The land stretched out under the stars, wide and wild and full of promise. And for the first time in years, Althea felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Home. Not just the place, the person. They climbed the stairs together, hand in hand, and closed the door on the past. Tomorrow, there would be work. Fences to mend, cattle to tend, a life to build. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who had fought for each other and won. Two people who had learned that trust was not given lightly, but once earned, it was worth everything. Althea kissed Jesse one more time, slow and sure, and knew with absolute certainty that this was the beginning of something good. Something real. Something that would last. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.